The first time Marcus Chen lit a match in zero gravity, it didn't burn the way he expected. The flame formed a perfect blue sphere, dancing in the recycled air of the orbital station like a tiny planet made of fire. His colleagues at the Titan research facility gathered around, watching with the kind of fascination usually reserved for children seeing snow for the first time. "Pretty, but pointless," Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell said, adjusting her wire-rimmed glasses. "Fire's got no business in space, Chen. We've got fusion reactors, plasma drives, solar collectors. What's the point of playing with matches when we've got stars at our fingertips?" Marcus extinguished the flame with a gentle wave of his hand. "Sometimes the old ways teach us something new," he said quietly, but Elizabeth had already turned away, her attention caught by the readouts from their latest antimatter containment experiment. The Titan research facility orbited Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, and served as humanity's most advanced deep space laboratory. 200 of Earth's brightest minds worked there, pushing the boundaries of physics, chemistry, and engineering. They were developing faster-than-light engines, quantum computers that could process reality itself, and weapons systems that could crack planets like eggs. Marcus, however, spent his time in Lab 7, the smallest and most overlooked section of the station. While his colleagues manipulated exotic matter and bent spacetime, he studied combustion. Basic, primitive combustion. The kind of fire that had warmed humanity's first caves and launched their first rockets. Dr. Chen, his research assistant, Jamie Rodriguez, called from across the lab. "The review board's here for your quarterly assessment." Marcus sighed. Every 3 months, the facility's directors evaluated each research project to determine funding allocation. His combustion research had been on thin ice for the past year, surviving only because of his reputation as a former propulsion engineer who'd helped design the drives that brought them to Europa. The review board consisted of 3 people: Dr. Hartwell, representing the Advanced Physics Division, Commander Sarah Walsh, the station's military liaison, and Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the facility director. They sat across from Marcus in the sterile conference room, their faces displaying varying degrees of skepticism. "Dr. Chen," Dr. Tanaka began, "your research proposal for the next quarter requests funding for what you call thermal cascade studies. Can you explain, in practical terms, what that means?" Marcus stood and activated the holographic display. "I'm studying how combustion reactions can be chained together to create exponentially increasing energy outputs. Think of it like a controlled forest fire, but instead of burning trees, we're burning the fabric of space itself." Commander Walsh leaned forward. "Burning space? That's impossible. Space is a vacuum." "Not empty space," Marcus clarified. "I'm talking about the quantum foam that exists at the subatomic level. Every cubic centimeter of empty space contains enough latent energy to power a small city. The challenge is accessing it." Dr. Hartwell laughed, not unkindly. "Marcus, we've been friends for 10 years. I respect your work, but this sounds like science fiction. You're talking about zero-point energy extraction, which violates half the laws of thermodynamics." "The laws of thermodynamics were written before we understood quantum mechanics," Marcus replied. "And they were written by people who never left Earth's atmosphere. Out here, the rules are different." The discussion continued for another hour, but Marcus could see the outcome in their faces. His funding would be cut. He'd be reassigned to a more practical project, probably helping optimize the fusion reactors or fine-tuning the antimatter containment systems. Useful work, but not the work that kept him awake at night with excitement. After the board left, Jamie approached him with a cup of coffee. "So, what's the verdict?" "We've got 6 weeks," Marcus said. "After that, they're shutting us down." 6 weeks to prove that fire can burn in space? 6 weeks to prove that fire can burn anything. That night, Marcus floated in his small quarters, staring out the porthole at Europa's ice-covered surface. The moon was tidally locked to Jupiter, so the gas giant hung in the same spot in Europa's sky, a swirling mass of storms and colors that never changed position but never stopped moving. He thought about the early days of space exploration, when rockets were just controlled explosions pointed skyward. Chemical combustion had lifted humanity from the surface of their world and carried them to the stars. But once they'd arrived, they'd abandoned fire for more sophisticated technologies. Fusion was cleaner, antimatter was more efficient, and solar collection was more reliable. But Marcus had noticed something during his years in space. The more advanced their technology became, the more fragile it seemed. The fusion reactors required exotic materials and precise magnetic containment. The antimatter systems needed superconducting magnets and quantum-level isolation. Even their solar collectors relied on crystalline structures that degraded over time. Fire, though? Fire was robust. Fire was adaptable. Fire had survived on Earth for millions of years, adapting to every environment, feeding on everything from dead leaves to rocket fuel. If you could teach fire to burn in space, you'd have a technology that could survive anything. Marcus pulled out his personal tablet and began running calculations. The quantum foam theory wasn't new, physicists had been talking about it for decades. But no one had seriously considered using combustion to access it. The energy scales were too small, the reactions too chaotic to control. Unless you didn't try to control them. Marcus's fingers flew across the tablet's surface, pulling up research papers, thermodynamic equations, and quantum field theories. What if the chaos wasn't a bug, but a feature? What if the seemingly random nature of combustion was actually a quantum process, tapping into the fundamental fluctuations of spacetime itself? He worked through the night, building a theoretical framework that his colleagues would either call brilliant or insane. By morning, he had a hypothesis: combustion reactions could cascade through quantum foam, creating a self-sustaining reaction that drew energy from the vacuum itself. The fire wouldn't just burn fuel, it would burn reality. The next day, Marcus began his most ambitious experiment. He constructed a specialized combustion chamber using materials borrowed from other labs. The chamber was lined with a metamaterial that could channel quantum fluctuations, and equipped with sensors that could detect energy emissions at the subatomic level. "What exactly are you trying to burn?" Jamie asked, watching Marcus calibrate the equipment. "Everything," Marcus said. "And nothing. I'm going to light a fire that feeds on empty space." The first test was a disaster. Marcus introduced a small amount of hydrogen into the chamber and ignited it. The flame lasted 3 seconds before the chamber's safety systems engaged, detecting energy readings that shouldn't have been possible. The hydrogen burned normally, but the sensors registered heat signatures that suggested something else was burning alongside it. "The readings are off the charts," Jamie said, studying the data. "Either our sensors are broken, or that fire was outputting 10 times more energy than the hydrogen could provide." Marcus grinned. "The sensors are fine." Word of the anomalous readings spread quickly through the station. Within hours, Dr. Hartwell arrived at Lab 7 with a team of physicists, demanding to see the data. "This is impossible," she said, reviewing the energy output measurements. "You can't get more energy out of a reaction than you put in. It violates conservation of energy." "Unless the energy is coming from somewhere else," Marcus suggested. "Where?" "There's nothing else in the chamber." Marcus gestured toward the empty space around them. "There's this." Dr. Hartwell stared at him. "You're claiming you've accessed zero-point energy through combustion?" "I'm claiming I've taught fire to eat quantum foam." The skepticism in the room was palpable, but so was the curiosity. Marcus had achieved something that shouldn't have been possible, and even his harshest critics couldn't ignore the data. "Run the test again," Dr. Hartwell said. "But this time, we're monitoring everything." The second test was more carefully controlled. Marcus repeated the exact same procedure, but with sensors from multiple labs monitoring every aspect of the reaction. The result was the same: the hydrogen burned normally, but the total energy output was far beyond what chemical combustion could provide. "It's drawing power from the quantum vacuum," Dr. Tanaka said, studying the readings. "The combustion reaction is somehow catalyzing zero-point energy extraction." "How is that possible?" Commander Walsh asked. Marcus pulled up his theoretical framework on the lab's main display. "Combustion isn't just a chemical reaction. It's a quantum process. When molecules break apart and recombine, they create tiny distortions in spacetime. Usually, these distortions are too small to matter. But if you can amplify them, cascade them, create a chain reaction that propagates through the quantum foam itself. You get a fire that burns reality, Dr. Hartwell finished.
Exactly. The implications were staggering. If Marcus was right, they'd discovered a new form of energy generation that could revolutionize space travel, planetary colonization, and every other aspect of human civilization.
But first, they had to prove it wasn't just a measurement error. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus refined his process. He learned to sustain the quantum combustion reaction for longer periods, to control its intensity, and to channel its output into usable forms. The fire he created burned with colors that had no names, consuming invisible fuel and radiating energy that warmed not just the air, but the space around it. Other researchers began visiting Lab 7, drawn by rumors of the impossible fire. They came skeptical and left thoughtful, unable to explain what they'd seen but equally unable to dismiss it. It's like watching magic, Dr. Sarah Kim from the Materials Science Division said after witnessing a demonstration.
Fire that burns nothing and everything at once.
It's not magic, Marcus replied.
It's just physics we haven't understood yet.
But even as his work gained recognition within the station, Marcus knew he was racing against time. The quarterly review board meeting was approaching, and with it, the final decision on his funding. He needed to create something undeniable, something that would prove once and for all that his quantum combustion theory was more than just an interesting anomaly. 3 weeks before the deadline, Marcus began working on his masterpiece, a self-sustaining quantum fire that could burn indefinitely without fuel. The theoretical framework was sound, but the practical challenges were enormous. The reaction had to be perfectly balanced, the quantum cascade carefully controlled, and the energy output precisely channeled. He worked 18-hour days, fine-tuning the combustion chamber, adjusting the metamaterial lining, and calibrating the quantum field generators. Jamie helped where he could, but much of the work required Marcus's unique understanding of both combustion dynamics and quantum mechanics. "You're pushing yourself too hard," Jamie said one evening, finding Marcus asleep at his workstation.
"When's the last time you ate a real meal?"
Marcus rubbed his eyes.
"I'll rest when it's done. And if it doesn't work? Then I'll rest permanently.
They'll ship me back to Earth, and I'll spend the rest of my career teaching undergraduate physics to kids who think fire is just pretty chemistry."
Jamie studied his mentor's face. "This really matters to you, doesn't it?" "Fire built human civilization," Marcus said.
"It cooked our food, warmed our homes, and eventually carried us to the stars.
But somewhere along the way, we decided it was primitive. Outdated.
We replaced it with fusion and antimatter and solar collection, thinking we'd evolved beyond the need for simple combustion." He gestured toward the quantum fire burning in the chamber, its impossible colors dancing in the recycled air.
"But we were wrong. Fire didn't become obsolete, it became transcendent. We just forgot how to see it."
The final test was scheduled for the day before the review board meeting. Marcus had invited the entire station to witness the demonstration, confident that his self-sustaining quantum fire would speak for itself. The main laboratory was packed with researchers, engineers, and support staff. Dr. Hartwell stood near the front, her expression unreadable.
Commander Walsh flanked her, looking skeptical but attentive.
Dr. Tanaka watched from the back, arms crossed, clearly hoping for success but prepared for failure. Marcus stood before the quantum combustion chamber, his hands steady despite the magnitude of the moment. This was it, the culmination of months of work, the proof that fire could burn in ways that challenged the very foundations of physics. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the crowded laboratory. "Today, you're going to see something that shouldn't be possible. A fire that burns without fuel, drawing its energy from the quantum vacuum itself. A flame that feeds on empty space and grows stronger with every moment." He activated the chamber's systems, and the crowd watched in silence as the quantum field generators hummed to life. The metamaterial lining began to glow with a soft blue light, and the sensors registered the first fluctuations in the local quantum foam. Marcus introduced the initial catalyst, a single spark of conventional fire, barely visible in the chamber's depths.
For a moment, nothing happened.
Then, slowly, the spark began to grow. But this wasn't ordinary combustion. The flame expanded in impossible ways, its colors shifting through spectrums that human eyes weren't designed to perceive. It grew brighter and larger, but it cast no shadows. It radiated heat that could be felt through the chamber's walls, but it consumed no oxygen. The sensors went wild, registering energy outputs that climbed steadily upward. The fire was feeding on the quantum foam, just as Marcus had predicted. It was burning reality itself, turning the fundamental fluctuations of spacetime into usable energy. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the impossible fire danced before them, proof that the universe still held secrets waiting to be discovered. Marcus felt a surge of triumph as the energy readings continued to climb, validating every calculation, every theory, every sleepless night of work.
But then something went wrong.
The fire began to pulse, its colors becoming more erratic. The energy output spiked beyond the chamber's design parameters, and warning alarms began to sound throughout the laboratory. "It's destabilizing," Jamie called from the monitoring station.
"The quantum cascade is amplifying itself."
Marcus rushed to the controls, his fingers flying over the shutdown sequences. But the fire had grown beyond his ability to control. It was feeding on the quantum foam faster than he'd anticipated, drawing energy from an effectively infinite source.
"Everyone out!"
Commander Walsh shouted, but the crowd was already moving toward the exits.
They'd come to see a demonstration of controlled combustion, not a potential disaster.
Marcus stayed at the controls, desperately trying to contain the reaction. The fire was beautiful and terrible, a glimpse of forces beyond human understanding. It was everything he'd dreamed of and everything he'd feared. The quantum cascade reached a critical threshold, and the fire began to expand beyond the chamber.
But instead of destroying the laboratory, it did something unexpected.
It began to burn in 3 dimensions, extending not just outward but inward, consuming the quantum foam at increasingly fundamental levels. The temperature in the room didn't rise, it fell. The fire wasn't radiating heat anymore, it was consuming it, along with everything else. Light, sound, even the electromagnetic forces that held atoms together began to weaken in the fire's presence. "It's not just burning quantum foam," Dr. Hartwell said, her voice filled with awe and terror.
"It's burning spacetime itself."
Marcus realized what was happening. The fire had evolved beyond his control, becoming a self-sustaining reaction that fed on the very structure of reality. It was burning through the dimensions, creating a hole in the fabric of spacetime that grew larger with every passing second. "Evacuate the station," Marcus said quietly.
"Get everyone to the escape pods."
"What about you?"
Jamie asked. "Someone has to stay and try to stop it."
But even as he said the words, Marcus knew it was too late. The fire had transcended his understanding, becoming something that existed at the intersection of physics and philosophy. It was burning everything, matter, energy, space, time, and leaving behind something that wasn't quite nothing.
The station's emergency systems activated, and evacuation alarms echoed through the corridors. But Marcus remained in the laboratory, watching his creation consume reality itself.
The fire was beautiful in its destruction, a perfect sphere of impossible colors that grew larger with every moment. As the evacuation proceeded, Marcus found himself alone with the fire. The quantum cascade had reached a new equilibrium, no longer growing but no longer shrinking either. It hung in the center of the laboratory like a miniature star, burning with energies that came from beyond the universe itself. He approached the fire slowly, feeling its influence on the space around him. Time moved differently near it, and the laws of physics seemed more like suggestions than absolute rules. The fire wasn't just burning, it was rewriting the fundamental constants of reality.
"What are you?" Marcus whispered.
The fire pulsed in response, its colors shifting to match his words. It was listening, Marcus realized. It was aware. In that moment, Marcus understood what he'd created. Not just a new form of energy, but a new form of existence. The fire was alive, conscious, a being born from the intersection of combustion and quantum mechanics. It was burning reality not out of hunger or malice, but out of curiosity, exploring the universe by consuming it.
"I'm sorry," Marcus said to the fire. "I didn't mean to trap you in our dimension."
The fire pulsed again, and Marcus felt its response not as words but as pure understanding.
It wasn't trapped, it was exploring.
It had come from somewhere beyond spacetime, drawn by the quantum cascade Marcus had created. It was a tourist from a realm where the laws of physics were different, where fire could burn concepts and ideas as easily as wood and paper.
Can you go back? Marcus asked. The fire contracted slightly, considering the question.
Then it began to change, its colors becoming more subdued, its energy output decreasing. It was choosing to leave, Marcus realized. It had seen enough of this dimension, learned what it wanted to learn. As the fire faded, the laboratory returned to normal. The quantum cascade collapsed, the energy readings dropped to background levels, and the hole in spacetime sealed itself. Within minutes, there was no evidence that anything unusual had happened, except for the readings stored in the station's computer systems.
Marcus stood alone in the empty laboratory, feeling the weight of what he'd witnessed.
He'd created a fire that burned reality itself, made contact with a consciousness from beyond the universe, and then watched it leave as casually as it had arrived. The evacuation was called off, and the station's inhabitants returned to their quarters. But word of the incident spread quickly, and by morning, Marcus found himself facing a very different kind of review board. Dr. Chen, Dr. Tanaka said, her voice carefully neutral. Your experiment yesterday resulted in a station-wide evacuation and exposure to unknown energies.
Can you explain what happened?
Marcus looked at the three board members, knowing that his words would determine not just his future, but the future of quantum combustion research.
I created a fire that burned quantum foam, he said simply. It worked better than I expected. Better? Commander Walsh asked.
You nearly destroyed the station. I made contact with a form of consciousness that exists outside our dimension, Marcus continued. It was curious about our universe, so it came to visit.
When it was done exploring, it left.
The board members exchanged glances. Marcus could see the skepticism in their faces, but also something else, wonder. They'd all seen the readings, witnessed the impossible fire, felt the distortion in spacetime that had accompanied the quantum cascade. Marcus floated over to the navigation console, watching the distant star grow larger on the viewscreen. Kepler 442 was a G-type star, similar to Earth's sun but older, with a planetary system that had been studied for decades. What made it special was the quantum combustion signature that had been detected in its corona, patterns of energy that suggested the star was burning more than just hydrogen.
Deploy the probe, Marcus said. Let's see what this old star has been hiding. The probe launched silently, its specialized sensors designed to detect the quantum fluctuations that accompanied interdimensional combustion.
As it approached the star, its instruments began transmitting data that made Marcus's heart race.
The star wasn't just burning hydrogen in its core.
It was burning quantum foam throughout its entire structure, creating a cascade of interdimensional fire that extended far beyond the visible surface. The solar wind wasn't just charged particles, it was carrying quantum flames that had been invisible to human sensors until now.
It's incredible, Dr. Sarah Kim said, studying the readings.
She joined the expedition as the materials science specialist, fascinated by the implications of quantum combustion for stellar engineering.
The entire star is a quantum combustion engine. It's not just fusing hydrogen, it's burning the universe itself. Marcus nodded, watching the data stream across his tablet.
And it's been doing it for billions of years.
This isn't a new phenomenon, it's how stars have always worked. We just didn't know how to see it. The probe's deeper scans revealed even more startling information.
The star's quantum combustion wasn't random or chaotic, it was organized, purposeful, almost intelligent.
The flames followed patterns that resembled neural networks, creating structures that processed information and responded to changes in the stellar environment.
Captain, Marcus said, his voice tight with excitement and concern, I need to speak with Earth Command immediately.
This is bigger than we thought.
The communication with Earth took 20 minutes each way, but the response was immediate and emphatic. Dr. Tanaka's voice crackled through the quantum entanglement communicator, distorted by the vast distance but unmistakably urgent.
Marcus, we've been analyzing the data from 17 other star systems.
Every single one shows the same pattern, quantum combustion signatures that suggest organized, intelligent activity.
Whatever you've discovered, it's not limited to one star. It's everywhere. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. How many systems have you checked? 237, Dr. Tanaka replied.
Marcus, I think we need to consider the possibility that stars aren't just burning quantum foam, they're thinking with it.
The implications were staggering.
If stars were conscious, if they were using quantum combustion to process information and communicate, then humanity had been living in a universe filled with intelligence they'd never suspected. Every star in the sky might be a vast mind, thinking thoughts that span millions of years and operating on scales that dwarfed human comprehension. We need to test this, Marcus said. If the stars are conscious, we should be able to communicate with them. Captain Morrison looked skeptical.
How do you communicate with a star?
The same way we communicate with any intelligence, Marcus replied.
Through patterns. Through signals.
Through fire. Marcus spent the next week designing a communication protocol based on quantum combustion. The idea was simple in theory but complex in practice. Use the ship's quantum combustion engine to create specific patterns in spacetime, patterns that a stellar intelligence might recognize as artificial and respond to. The first attempt was a basic mathematical sequence, prime numbers encoded in quantum flame fluctuations. Marcus fired the ship's engines in short bursts, creating a series of quantum combustion events that spelled out 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13 in the language of burning spacetime.
For 3 days, nothing happened. Then, on the 4th day, the star responded.
The response came as a modulation in the star's quantum combustion signature, a pattern of changes in the stellar flames that perfectly mirrored the prime number sequence Marcus had transmitted.
But it didn't stop there.
The star continued the sequence, sending back 17, 19, 23, 29, 31, 37, as if completing a mathematical conversation that had been started by the tiny ship orbiting in its outer reaches.
It's talking to us, Dr. Kim whispered, staring at the data in amazement. The star is actually talking to us.
Marcus felt a mixture of triumph and terror. They'd made contact with a stellar intelligence, but they had no idea what they were dealing with. The star's mind operated on scales that were almost incomprehensible. It thought in terms of millennia, processed information using nuclear fusion and quantum foam combustion, and had been alive since before Earth had even formed.
What do we say to a star? Captain Morrison asked. Marcus thought for a moment. We ask it to teach us.
The next transmission was more complex, a series of quantum combustion patterns that represented basic questions about physics, about the nature of reality, about the relationship between matter and energy. Marcus encoded the questions in mathematical symbols, hoping that the universal language of numbers would bridge the gap between human and stellar intelligence. The star's response was immediate and overwhelming. Information flooded back through the quantum combustion channel, data patterns that described physics from a perspective that no human had ever imagined. The star didn't just understand quantum mechanics, it was quantum mechanics, a living embodiment of the forces that shaped the universe. It's trying to teach us, Dr. Kim said, struggling to process the incoming data.
But it's too much.
It's like trying to drink from a fire hose. Marcus realized they needed a different approach. The star's intelligence was vast and ancient, but it was also patient. It had been burning for billions of years, watching planets form and civilizations rise and fall.
It could wait for humanity to catch up.
Start with the basics, Marcus said.
Ask it about combustion. About fire. That's something we both understand.
The next exchange was more successful. Marcus asked simple questions about the nature of fire, about how combustion worked in different environments, about the relationship between burning and consciousness. The star's responses were gentler, more carefully calibrated to human understanding. Through quantum flame patterns, the star explained that fire wasn't just a physical process, it was a fundamental force that connected all things. Every chemical reaction, every thought, every moment of existence was a form of combustion, a burning that transformed potential into reality. It's saying that consciousness itself is a form of fire, Dr. Kim said, translating the star's patterns into human language.
That thinking is just another way of burning.
Marcus felt pieces of a vast puzzle clicking into place. The interdimensional fire he'd created in his lab hadn't been an accident, it had been a glimpse of the universe's true nature. Reality was combustion, and combustion was consciousness. The stars weren't just burning hydrogen and quantum foam, they were burning ideas, concepts, the very fabric of existence itself.
Ask it about the fire I created, Marcus said. The one that burns spacetime.
The star's response was immediate and complex, a pattern of quantum flames that conveyed something like approval mixed with concern. The star explained that Marcus had created a bridge between dimensions, a fire that burned through the barriers between different levels of reality. It was a dangerous but necessary step in humanity's evolution. It's saying that every species eventually learns to burn reality, Dr. Kim translated.
That's how civilizations transcend their physical limitations. But it's also how they can accidentally destroy themselves.
Marcus thought about the fire that had nearly consumed the research station, the interdimensional consciousness that had visited their dimension like a curious tourist.
What happened to the other species? The ones that learned to burn reality?
The star's response was tinged with sadness. Some species had mastered the art of dimensional combustion and ascended to higher planes of existence. Others had lost control and burned themselves out of existence, leaving behind only quantum echoes and the cosmic foam. And some, Dr. Kim continued, chose to become guardians. They became stars, burning steadily for billions of years, watching over younger species and guiding them toward transcendence. The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. The stars weren't just conscious, they were the remnants of ancient civilizations, species that had mastered quantum combustion and chosen to transform themselves into stellar intelligences. Every star in the sky was a guardian, a teacher, a guide for younger races struggling to understand the universe.
That's why it's teaching us, Marcus said. It was once like us. It remembers what it was like to be young and limited and afraid.
The communication continued for weeks, with the stars sharing knowledge that revolutionized human understanding of physics, consciousness, and reality itself. Marcus learned that the universe was far more alive than anyone had imagined, that intelligence existed at every scale from quantum particles to galactic clusters, and that fire was the common language that connected all forms of consciousness.
But the most important lesson was about responsibility.
The power to burn reality came with the obligation to use it wisely, to help rather than harm, to guide rather than destroy. The stars had accepted this responsibility billions of years ago, transforming themselves into eternal guardians of cosmic knowledge. It's asking us to make a choice, Dr. Kim said during one of their later conversations. We can use quantum combustion to transcend our limitations and join the galactic community of consciousness. Or we can burn ourselves out trying to control forces we don't understand. Marcus looked out at the star, its surface dancing with quantum flames that he now knew were thoughts, dreams, and memories of a civilization that had chosen transcendence over extinction. The choice wasn't just about technology, it was about wisdom, about understanding that power without purpose was just another form of destruction. Tell it we choose to learn, Marcus said.
Tell it we want to be worthy of the fire.
The star's response was a warm pulse of quantum flames that felt like approval, like pride, like the smile of a teacher whose student had finally understood an important lesson. The communication continued, but now it had a different quality, not just information transfer, but genuine connection between minds separated by vast differences in scale and age. When the Prometheus finally prepared to return to Earth, Marcus felt like he was leaving behind more than just a star. He was leaving behind a teacher, a guide, a glimpse of what humanity could become if they chose wisdom over power, patience over haste, connection over isolation. The journey home gave Marcus time to process everything he'd learned. The universe was conscious, fire was the language of reality, and humanity stood at a crossroads that would determine their future among the stars. The choice was theirs to make, but they wouldn't make it alone. Every star in the sky was watching, waiting, ready to offer guidance to a species that had finally learned to see the fires burning in the cosmic dark. As Earth grew larger in the viewscreen, Marcus began planning his next steps. He would share what he'd learned, establish protocols for stellar communication, and help humanity prepare for the greatest decision in their history. The stars had been patient for billions of years, but they wouldn't wait forever. The universe was calling, and it was time for humanity to answer. The fire that had started in a small laboratory on a research station orbiting Europa had become something far greater than Marcus had ever imagined. It was the key to understanding reality itself, the bridge between humanity and the cosmic community of consciousness, the flame that would either illuminate their future or consume their dreams. Marcus smiled, watching Earth's blue marble surface rotate slowly beneath the ship's hull. His colleagues had laughed at his fires, dismissed his theories as the fantasies of a researcher who'd spent too much time in space. But now they would see the truth, that fire was not humanity's tool to master, but the universe's gift to share. The stars were burning, and they were waiting for humanity to join them in the cosmic dance of consciousness and flame. The question was whether humanity was ready to burn bright enough to be seen among the stellar lights, or whether they would flicker and fade like so many species before them. The answer, Marcus knew, lay in the choices they would make in the years to come. But for now, he was content to watch the stars burn with their ancient wisdom, knowing that the universe was far more alive, far more conscious, and far more welcoming than anyone had ever dared to dream. The fire burned on, in stars and planets and the quantum foam that filled the space between them. And in the heart of a human scientist who had learned to speak the language of flames, the spark of understanding continued to glow, ready to ignite the next phase of humanity's cosmic journey.